What up, TCK Potters? I'm your host, Sky Guasco, joined always by my man, Lukas Kaser, and you are tuned into the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Candlestick Kids, leave a rate and review anywhere you're listening to your podcast, and follow us on IG at fantasyfootball_TCK Pod and on Twitter at TCK_pod. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get into it. Welcome back, TCK Potters. This is episode 211 of the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast. Lukas and I back with you here to break down the tight end rankings, our first round of official tight end rankings. We spent some time going down the schedules for fantasy football yesterday. We're going to get into a tight end premium draft tomorrow. Tight ends is kind of a finicky position, though, man. I know last week you and I had a lot of trouble, or maybe the most difficult position I think you and I would agree to rank is the wide receivers as a group. Tight ends, I felt like got more and more difficult the further the list I got down. I felt like the top chunk was actually pretty solid for me. But then, of course, we put our rankings together. And like I say every time, we don't discuss these as a group. Of course, we talk about individual players. We don't discuss these as a group intentionally so that you and I are fresh on the comparisons for our rankings. And there's only maybe 10 out of our 24 that are drastically different. Whereas the receivers, man, it's fucking – all over the board after the top group. So how do you feel about your general rankings of the first set of tight ends? And then how do you feel about the tight end position as far as ranking them and really their importance to fantasy football overall? Because, again, we're going to get into tight end premium, but there's also the other side of the coin in fantasy these days of just cutting the tight end position as a mandatory slot in your rosters. How do you feel about tight ends overall in fantasy football?
Yeah, I think we'll get into right away really that I think there's a clear tier of two when I think there's a common conception of like this year the tight ends are deep. I think people are starting to think that's the case. And when I kind of went through my first run, I don't think there really is. The same as last year. I think I kind of have the same takes. And I'll try to echo that through this episode. But then I think also this is just the first run. Once I have my projections and my final rankings, maybe that'll change. But from what I'm looking at right now, it's still pretty top two dominant, and then it's just kind of wait till the end and take a couple guys because I don't think there's a whole lot of value in, I don't know, rounds 5 through 9 like there sometimes is.
I agree. There's also something else I realized when I was doing my rankings about tight ends specifically in that when I look down the rankings and I think of who the player was last season and how I feel about them, just my gut, how my gut feels about them before I dive into numbers and recency bias and all that shit. It was interesting because I feel like what I do every single season, I do this on purpose. I get excited around the Super Bowl and I get into the next fantasy season. And before I really dive into numbers and stuff, I take about a month to just clear my head of analytics and shit. And I just go through rankings, super bare bones. And I just say, I'm like, I think that this player is better than this player. I think they're going to rank higher. And I just do a gut check ranking. Then through the summer, as the summer progresses, I go through the numbers and actually fine-tune my rankings. It was pretty intense how far up and down some of these guys moved when I actually looked at numbers versus just like my gut call. For example, I was like, Higbee for me was like maybe number 4 at the end of the season just on my gut. And now he's like borderline top 10 for me when I jumped into numbers. So let's jump into it, man. The consensus, no matter what league you're playing, it's Kelce and Kittle. We are talking about redraft. We are talking about full PPR as we always do on here. Quick question right off the bat, though. Redraft, we both have Kelce. Then we have Kittle at 2. In Dynasty, who's your number 1 and 2 really quick for tight end?
I don't think there's a correct answer to this because the way I look at it, and I think I'll even just say it, I have, as weird as this might sound, I think there is 4 tiers in the top guys, in the top 5 guys, maybe even 6 guys in fantasy right now in terms of just ranking. I think in Dynasty you would think Kittle because of age, but then in reality Kelce's probably going to play for 4 to 5 more years. So, like, it's tough for me to really gauge. That's why I said there's not really a right answer. I think we ran into this strategy or decision in our league. We were like, we want one of the tight ends, and we're like, we're going for the win now. So we went Kelce ultimately, but I don't think we're going to be replacing our tight end for the next 3-4 years anyway. So I don't think we're running into an issue, but I think I'm not like, oh, he's younger, insert above, because I still think Kelce has the edge on him in the next 2-3 years.
Yeah, I agree. I like that. All right, man, let's jump into it. Consensus number 1 and 2 for you and I. We're going to do our top 24, more or less, dive into some players deeper than others. Number 1 and 2 for us across the board, it's going to be Kelsey and then Kittle. Number 3 and 4, also the same. Ertz and then Andrews. So our top 4 are the same. Kelsey, Kittle, Ertz, and Andrews. Really quick, man, I had Andrews ahead of Ertz before I started really diving into this. But for me, it's just I know he's going to have a higher snap percentage. He just has to go up, the snap percentage. His targets might even go up as well, but he had a huge touchdown ratio last year, which I think is going to regress. And as much as I think Goddard eventually takes over Ertz, I just don't see Ertz falling off of a cliff in tight ends. And we know that Wentz has that initial look, even though they have more work there and more weapons in Philadelphia. Wentz and Ertz are connected, and I just think that continues this year. Top 3 as long as he stays healthy. So for me, I went back and forth with Andrews and Ertz. I eventually settled on Ertz and Andrews. Is it that easy for you, or were you back and forth as well?
Yeah, I guess I'll just go into my Andrews take because I think there's a lot of red flags for him this year, and I think it's going to be really in depth what I kind of break down. But I think people are over exaggerating what he did last year. So obviously the touchdown regression with Lamar Jackson is coming. I took a sample of quarterbacks since the merger, like 1970, that threw for a 7% TD rate or higher and at least started 5 games. There was about doing the 18 in the sample, and then in the next year, the following year, to find the average dip. 3 of them were actually from last year, and Lamar, Ryan Tannehill, and Drew Brees, and one of them was Brady, and he just got injured the first game. So I threw those 4 out. So 14 in year N+1 or year 2, whatever you want to call it. The average TD dip was 2.55%. So then I go in ahead and I took Lamar's 9%, dipped it down to 6.45, which brought him, if you kept his exact amount of pass attempts, which in reality, if he's not throwing at a high TD rate, they're probably not going to throw the ball that much. But you can't really value that as well. So if you take the 401 pass attempts, it puts him right about at 25.86 touchdowns. If you kept the exact same touchdown market share for every player on the team last year, Andrews would have saw 3 touchdowns less. And then I went and took the average of every one of his scoring plays, which was 14.9 yards times 3 for each touchdown, 44.7 yards. So 4.4 fantasy points plus the 18 for the touchdowns is 22.4 points less fantasy points. And that to me is like, it just has to happen because I'm taking the averages, the trends of that. That would have dropped him from the tight end 3 to the tight end 7. And I know we'd be talking about him completely different if he was the tight end 7 versus the tight end 3 coming into this year. And one more thing with the snap share, yes, I think it's going to go up, but I think where we're going to see a decrease is he dominated in the slot last year. Mm-hmm. Targeted the second highest while in out of percentage in the slot snaps, while being 44th in slot snaps in total. They drafted Devin Duvernay, who played 97% of his snaps last year in college when he broke out in the slot. Prochet played about 47%, but he's only 5'11". I can't see him playing a ton of outside role. He's also a 6th-round pick, so he still has to make the team. And Willie Snead still plays 75% of the snaps in the slot. Crazy. And they were in the fifth least 11 personnel plays and only passed the ball 51% of the time in that 11 personnel. So yes, the snap share is going to go up, but he's not in on run plays. Like he's just not. It's Nick Boyle and then Hayden Hurst if they're in 2 tight end sets. They also have Patrick Ricard at fullback. So really, how much more of a snap share are we going to see? Maybe up to 50%, but in reality, the touchdowns are going to dip. So with that being said, he's at my 4, but I don't really like him there. I just can't move him down because the Ravens are just that good, but I just don't like him. I think he's going to be going way too high. I've faded him in almost every league. For shout out to tomorrow's video, I ended up taking him as my second tight end, the tight end premium. But you'll see tomorrow, I just didn't like anyone on the board for the picks. I could afford to do that, I guess, with my team. So, like I said, I think I have my 4 tiers. I have Kelsey's in the zone. I just think that him and Kittle are both due for positive TD regression, whereas Andrews is not. And Ertz, even though Goddard's there, he's still going to finish as high as probably tight end 3, even though we don't want him to. And then I think Andrews is kind of like the sitting there with the most upside, but in reality, like that has to come down. So I'm just a little cautious with Mark Andrews' situation um, based on trends, but those are very speculative because the touchdown market share, they could literally go all to him too, or something stupid like that could happen. So I think just be a little cautious and don't go all in on Mark Andrews.
I think it's a great take, man. I love Mark Andrews. Both of us do, and I believe that he is a top 5 tight end. We both got him at 4, so we agree. But I look at this list too, and I'm thinking, who would I put over him? I can't put anybody else over him. I had him at 3 until I just like kind of game film and like feeling and Goddard over Ertz and all this shit. And then I dove into the numbers. I was like, look, it's Ertz game until it's not, you know. So he's number 4, but I don't know who I would put over him. So Andrews is my 4 as well. To your point, really quick to pile on Andrews here a little bit. He is still yet to see double-digit targets in a single game in his career, which is crazy. You would think that they just pounded him last year, but they didn't. Again, they didn't have to. Also, you mentioned Hayden Hurst was on the field a ton last year in running plays. He's obviously gone in Atlanta. We'll talk about him next. I know that you're high on him as well, and Nick Boyle too. So that's the thing. Is like I think that opens up those targets. But you're right, Duvernay over the slot. Snead is still around somehow. I totally agree. And, of course, in a run-first offense. So that efficiency we're talking about with Mark Ingram and we're talking about with Lamar Jackson, that whole offense is going to be a well-oiled machine and just fine. I think the passing efficiency overall will come down a little bit, and I think Mark Andrews is going to be, unfortunately, a part of that as well. So I agree with you. Let's jump down the list a little bit. I'm going to let you go again here and double up. You've got Hayden Hurst all the way up at number 5. I have him at 10. We talked about him in depth yesterday about the Falcons and the tight end position for the Falcons having the worst fantasy football schedule over the entire season. They are 32 out of 32 for fantasy football schedule. Of course, that's projections coming into 2020. We know how those go a little bit. But I basically had, you mentioned multiple times, which I agree with you. It's not necessarily something that I'm going to completely weigh my rankings on. But when it comes down to this player, I might look at the schedule. And I did that with Hayden Hurst with about 4 guys. And I just kept one notch. And all of a sudden I was like, all right, top 10, I got to keep him in there because of the volume that we've seen Austin Hooper get. And then Tony Gonzalez before that with Matt Ryan over the years. So I like that position, but top 10 felt good for me. You have him all the way up at 5, though. So convince me otherwise for Hayden Hurst.
Yeah, so there's just a ton of vacated production. It's the same that goes for the Calvin Ridley take I had last week. The most vacated targets are to the tight end. I'm not saying those are all going to Hayden Hurst because, to be honest, he's a new system to this offense. They're not all going to go to him. But he is more athletic or just as athletic as Austin Hooper. He's not as tall, but that's not the reason that Austin Hooper got a lot of red zone targets. Like, yes, it was good to be tall, but they weren't like just throwing jump balls. It's because that, one, he never connects with Julio for who knows what reason. And Ridley is not really used in the red zone. I don't really know if he needs to be. He's more the deep threat touchdown guy with just a good volume, big chunk play. So Hayden Hurst is sliding into probably the best vacated spot, to be honest, on probably any position you can name, I think, or any team, any position this offseason. A lot of vacated production. The team's going to have to score points if they want to keep up with Drew Brees and Tom Brady. Even the Panthers, to be honest. And then they have a tough schedule, which means that they're going against good defenses, and most of those good defenses have good offenses. So that's going to have to keep scoring points. And then they came out today or yesterday when you're hearing this, and Matt Ryan said he's the most athletic tight end that he's had. I don't remember if he had Tony G for a couple of years or not, but it's the most athletic tight end he's had since Tony G. And I really think that – he was a first-round pick. He got taken before Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, so he's good at football. I just think that he's really going to come into this role, and I think it's going to be a seamless transition because I think you can put a tight end in about any role on any team, and he'll succeed. And to be honest, he came from a team that uses 3 tight end sets in the most creative way possible. I think he can come to a spread offense pass first team. So, yeah, 5 might be too high, but I think in comparison to who I have him ahead of, it can be done, I think.
Yeah, but it's question marks, and I totally agree with you. Let's run it down real quick. You have Waller at 6, Ingram at 7, Gesicki at 8, Higbee at 9, and then Hunter Henry at 10. I've got Ingram at 5, Waller at 6, Henry at 7, Higbee at 8, Jonnu Smith up at 9, we'll talk about here in a second, and then Hayden Hurst at 10. So, again, I agree with you. There's question marks kind of everywhere with Waller and Ingram and Gesicki, Higbee. I just think that again, I'm a little bit worried how he's going to fit in there. But, I mean, I will eventually probably move him up. I just, for some reason, I'm locked into this, like, I haven't yet seen him do it. He got hurt as a rookie. Last year it was Mark Andrews' season. But the one play that I've seen seen Hurst do in the pros was he came, and I was very frustrated because I had Mark Andrews on all my fucking teams last year. Mark Andrews, like, he caught like a 20-yard pass or something like that, and he came out of the game. And the very next play was a seam route to Hayden Hurst, which definitely would have been Mark Andrews. And Hayden Hurst is athletic, and he's fast. He fucking just untouched 60 yards for a touchdown. Yeah. So, I mean, he can do it. I know he can do it. I know that Matt Ryan does not like to throw to Julio Jones, which we all understand in Atlanta. So those are all Hayden Hurst touchdowns. So I'm with you. I'll probably move him up. But for me right now, I see the upside of all these other guys. And for me, Hayden Hurst, for some reason, just has like a really solid floor with limited upside. Like Austin Hooper was the tight end 6 2 years in a row in Atlanta. I think that's absolutely the upside with Todd Gurley coming in and them having, Ridley taking another step and still Julio Jones. So I don't see him going higher than that. But at that same thing, like I just am not sure that he's got that ceiling. So that's why I've got him a little bit lower. We both have Waller coming in at 6, as I mentioned. I've got Hunter Henry at 7. This one straight up scares me. And this is kind of just like it's an impulse thing. I'm not excited about it. Actually, I'm going to read some stats that are going to like talk me out of this ranking. Tyrod Taylor has never attempted more than 27.25 passes per game over an entire season. So he's never averaged more than 30 passes a game over an entire season. Not looking good for anybody other than Austin Eckler potentially in this offense. He's battled injuries. He's got 2 quarterbacks. All these things are stacked up against him. I just feel like after a season of actually getting it in last year with Hunter Henry, I just think he can catapult onto that. Also, as little as Tyrod Taylor does throw the ball, he and Charles Clay back in the day with the Bills did have a nice rapport. And there was about a season and a half there in Buffalo when Kelvin Benjamin was trying to become a thing but wasn't, where Tyrod Taylor and Charles Clay basically were that offense outside of Shady McCoy. So I'm just going to give it to him. I think that there's going to be dump downs. There's going to be quick dump offs. That's Hayden Hurst and Hunter Henry and Keenan Allen. And then when Herbert comes in as a rookie eventually, I think he's going to need that safety valve as well. So I'm just kind of giving that athleticism, and I'm going to believe one more year in Hunter Henry for the number 7 spot. All right, let's go down the list here a little bit. We've got Evan Ingram at 5 and 7. Higbee comes in for me at 8. You've got him at 9. Again, we talked about him at length on yesterday's episode. Tune back into that. I've got Jonnu Smith at number 9. I'm looking here. You've got him at 14. For me, again, this is strictly an upside play. And I think with tight ends, man, once you get out of the first couple guys, it's really upside for me. And this really is strictly based on upside. I think Jonnu Smith can be that guy. We saw Delaney Walker for a number of seasons with Marcus Mariota and his time in Tennessee. And before that in his career, he was very efficient in this offense. I think that Jonnu Smith could definitely be that guy. Jonnu Smith and Ryan Tannehill played 10 games last year. In those 10 games, those numbers paced over 16 games, would have resulted in the tight end 12 for Jonnu Smith last year in PPR per game. Walker's gone. They have little competition in the passing game outside of A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. I do understand that they have limited targets to go around in that offense. But again, I think athleticism and upside really boost these guys in those middle to late tiers in tight end. And I just think that Jonnu Smith is the type of guy to get, 60, 70 receptions and turn that into 700, 800 yards and maybe 7 or 8 touchdowns. If he's able to pull a move like that, I mean, that's top 6 easy. And then you're flirting with like top 5 in tight ends because it happens so quickly. So again, I know the concerns there, but I just feel like A.J. Brown is not going to be such a dominant receiver as far as target share goes. I do think Jonnu Smith takes a big chunk of that. Therefore, I'm gonna keep him in my top 10. He's at number 9 there. And then I got Hurst, and you have Henry. Then I have Gronk. We're not going to go into Gronk. This is strictly a gut call. I made my whole take yesterday. We spent about 10 minutes on yesterday's podcast talking about Gronk and Brady. I've got him at 11. Go ahead and listen back if you haven't already on my tier for Gronk. I just think the work's going to be there with a limited offseason with Brady and all these other receivers. You've got TJ Hawkinson at number 11. I have him all the way down at 19. Again, I just haven't fully seen it yet. I think Matt Stafford is going to be chucking it, and I'm just not sure. And we didn't see Eric Ebron develop over years with Matt Stafford until he went to the Colts and actually had a whole new offense. I'm a little hesitant on Hawkinson, but you've got him all the way at 11. Floor is yours.
Yeah. So what I'm actually going to do for the draft guide is I've been talking with the man Dwayne and how I think people can use this to make their their overall fantasy projections, rankings, thought process. So like set a baseline market share. What is say 20%? So what 20% gives you based on historical averages for each team in terms of fantasy points at each position? I think this kind of plays into how I sort of dove into the 11 through really 20 range. The 20%, the 10%, the 15%, whatever you want to give these tight ends is more valuable to me on the Lions because I think they're going to be such a high-powered offense. The touchdown opportunity is going to be there. Yes, it's a reach because the hit rates, I know we've referenced it, the only one in the last 10 years in the top 10 is Eric Ebron to the Lions, 2 picks gap from 6 to 8. So it's tough to really use that as data, whereas some of these other guys we definitely can. I just think that's more of an upside play. But now that I'm kind of rethinking it, I think once I make that tool, and I'll try and make that like interactive to where you can make a copy and put in whatever you want in terms of market share, et cetera. So I think that'll be something to look out for. And I think that'll be really beneficial in evaluating these murky situations and really trying to find what is upside. And on top of Jonnu Smith, in the same thought, the 20% market share on the Titans this isn't very intriguing to me. But then again, 60 catches, like you said, 600, 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. Like that's definitely doable. But I think this first run of tight end rankings, I'm just like, I don't know yet. The one thing that does scare me though is in the playoffs, we saw that really this passing offense, not that they were shut down, they just didn't need to use them. And I don't really see anything changing. They used Anthony Ferkser quite a bit, which is a good football move because he plays the J back, which is really every single tight end we saw get drafted in the draft is a J back. And I think that's why they got drafted. And they were just no-name guys because that's a valuable position because you saw it all the time. Anthony Ferkser is wide open on pass plays in the playoffs because no one's going to cover him. They run wheel routes.
Kittle.
They run – yeah, like exactly. So that kind of scares me. But I think in the – really like just looking at it, Jonnu Smith's in line for a big role. The one thing, too, is Adam Humphries was hurt last year, and Smith played quite a bit of slot snaps. So we'll see how that plays out. But, yeah, I think – so really the main reason why I have Hawkinson this high is that the passing volume in terms of his market share means more to me than, say, Jonnu Smith. And I have one more guy, too, the next guy, Jack Doyle. This is the one that – I think I might be too low on him here. So Rivers average. This
is your Eifert maybe.
It could be. So Rivers average tight end finish his whole career in PPR tight end 7. Doyle had 13 targets inside the 20-yard line last year, and Ebron had 10. Obviously Ebron's gone, so that's 23 targets inside the 20 last year. Frank Reich, the head coach, the tight end room, his averages 157 targets. And his backup is who? Mo Alley Cox and Trey Burton. And if Mo Alley Cox, like the 6'6", 280 guy, was really that good, he would have broke out by now. And unless Trey Burton bounces back, this is Jack Doyle's room. And who's he competing really with for targets? T.Y. Hilton, 46% chance re-injury. Paris Campbell, 51% chance re-injury, and a rookie in Michael Pittman. So, like, to me, this is the one that they invested $7 million a year for 3 years in him and chose him over Ebron. I think people are going to be way too low on him. I'm already seeing him out of like top 24s, top 30s. Like people are just – I don't really get it because volume is king in the tight end position. That's why you see Jason Witten, top 10 tight end last year, and people will be like, I don't want the volume, I want the upside. But getting a guy like Jack Doyle in the 13th round that's going to get you 8 points a week, that is upside. Like just because someone can score, I don't know, 20 points one week and 0 the next week compared to 10 and 10, it's the same thing. It's literally the same thing. 20 total points in 2 weeks. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that he's such a good tight end just in real life. He's huge. Who are they going to throw to in the red zone? Michael Pittman, but we've never seen him do it. So I think he's definitely one that I'll probably move over Hawkinson right away after this. And honestly, Hunter Henry. I just think Hunter Henry's injury concern it's still there, and the volume there is not going to be great either. So I really like Jack Doyle as not even a streamer. I think a late guy that you can toss in, kind of like what we saw with Waller last year and Jason Witten, and I guess Mark Andrews, but kind of a different scenario.
I've got Doyle at 15 right now, but he is a guy that I kept moving up and moving up and moving up. Again, with my gut check when I had these rankings, I had Doyle like at 25 or something stupid because I was like, dude, it feels like he's old, but he's not for tight ends, right? And he's been around forever. He's been overshadowed by Ebron. Finally, he's been hurt kind of. He and Andrew Luck were really tight, but what's Rivers going to do? But then I started diving into it. Rivers connection, Frank Reich connection. Jack Doyle, his best year was 2017. He was the tight end 7. That averaged perfectly in 15 games. So he would have been higher than that with one more game there. He had 80 receptions on 108 targets, 690 yards, and 4 touchdowns. I could easily see him getting, again, 80 receptions, 800 yards, and about 6 to 8 touchdowns. I mean, you could say that about so many of these guys. And obviously, if all of them do the same fucking thing, then how do you differentiate them? Yeah. I understand that argument. However, we've seen Phillip Rivers do it forever. Antonio Gates was like 40 years old, still Jason Witten, because that's what Rivers wants, right? Mm-hmm. So I like that a lot. And I think already I see a ranking of him at 10, and I want to start moving Doyle up the system here. So I probably will as well. And again, I think he's going to be completely slept on. He already is. Oh, you got him at 12. Excuse me. I've got him at 15. But I could see him being a top 12 per se. Now, upside probably doesn't have it. But with the floor at the tight end position, I'm with you. Because I'll tell you right now, 20 points in a big boom game is awesome from, say, a Hawkinson, right? 20 points in 1 week, that might be a week winner because you're tight end. But a 0, which happens with tight ends, could be a week loser. If I'm going to get 10 to 12 to 14 every single week from a consistent guy with an occasional 20 on a touchdown or 2, I might want to take that for safety depending on my team. So I like that call a lot. All right, let's get down the list here. Blake Jarwin is my guy. I've been talking him up big time already. And, the beauty of what we do is that we get to compare ourselves to other people. But the unfortunate part of what we do is that there's a lot of other fantasy people out there doing analysis and things like that, mainly the fantasy footballers. So I'm not going to say that I know things that other people don't. And of course they're professionals. So I would not, I'm not comparing myself to them at all, but it is very self-assuring when you and I have these conversations and then say 2-3 weeks later, just in the episode order, a bigger account, Fantasy Pros, CBS, Pro Football Focus, Roto World, the Fantasy Footballers, BDGE, whatever. These bigger accounts come up over the top of us and break down their tight ends. And essentially they have the same takes that one of us have had to. You know what I mean? And we don't do this for the attaboys and the fist bumps, but that gives me some excitement inside that I'm doing the right thing sometimes. And Blake Jarwin is the dude. I've had Blake Jarwin. I've been repping him since the season ended and Jason Witten went to Vegas. And now, Mike Wright is pretty much driving the Jarwin train, which is great. But I was just excited to also hear that. Basically, it comes down to this. Jarwin and Witten combined for 124 targets last year. In the offense, of course, Witten getting a chunk of that. He had 41 targets. That's it. So Jason Witten had about 83 targets there. So Jarwin had 41 targets last year, but converted 75% of those into catches for 365 yards and 3 touchdowns. If we give Jarwin a boost to double those targets, which is 80 targets, which still leaves about 40 plus designated to the tight end position, his numbers are closer to 65, 706. Again, the same fucking pattern here, which is basically a top 12 tight end. But that's with 40 targets unaccounted for. If he gets another 40 targets or 20 targets, in my opinion, he could easily be one of those 80, 800, and 8 to 10 guys for sure, boosting him there. Witten was the tight end 11 last year. Jarwin, in my opinion, has top 10 upside easy and could even push for top 8 to 6 if he actually gets 100-plus targets, which, again, they had 124 to the tight end last year, and I just don't see any other competition there. CeeDee Lamb, I get it. I understand the argument. They're going to play the same place in the field, but Jarwin's going to be on one side, CeeDee will be on the other side, Gallup and Amari will be down the sidelines, and Zeke up the middle, of course, which is going to keep defenses honest with the linebackers there. So I just think Jarwin's – I think he's a mismatch. I think he's a far more athletic, obviously 10 years younger plus than Jason Witten, and I think they can make it happen in this offense. So I'm riding the Jarwin train. I'm feeling it. I've got him at number 13. I know there's a lot of people kind of starting to pick up on him, but I've literally drafted him in every mock we've been doing with other groups and shit. I draft him in like the 12th, 15th round every single time, no problem. And I think that that's going to probably continue into the summer. So he is – right now he's my Mark Andrews of last year. So I like that a lot. You've got him down at 18. Is CD really the biggest scare? And once you give your take on Jarwin, why don't you go ahead and jump into Ebron as well?
Yeah, I think I might need to move him above Goddard, maybe up to 15. The only thing that scares me is he's not going to play a full tight end snap share because he's just a receiving tight end. They wouldn't have brought Jason Witten back to block and play the receiving role if Jarwin could have done it. And the other thing is, I mean, tight ends go to die in Green Bay, and the coach that was the cause of that's coming to Dallas.
Sure.
So it's just a little scary, but I think in reality, he's such a good receiving threat. I think that they're just going to run 4 wide, but 11 personnel with a tight end quite a bit. They have Schultz and some fullback, I can't remember his name, that'll just kind of block here and there. So, yeah, I think it's definitely there. That's more of a personal play for me because I don't really want to be sitting here rooting for the 4th, probably the 5th option in the offense to score fantasy points every week. Like, I don't want to be like, come on, let's go to Jarwin, and then they go to Cooper, Gallup,
anybody else,
Lamb, Zeke, Pollard. So, like, I don't know. It's more of a personal play, but I think I'll probably move him up. But that's to show, like, the whole market share thing I'm talking about. If you give him 20% market share, which is probably unlikely, we'll say 15, but that 15% is so much more valuable than a 15% on probably, I'd say, 20 other teams in the NFL in terms of the tight end position. So, yeah, I don't mind that take at all. And his ADP is not going to rise more than 2 rounds because people are going to look at it the same way that I will, that he's the sixth option on the team.
And I think he's a big red zone target as well. Obviously, Zeke's going to get the runs, Amari and Gallup, whatever, but I don't see them looking at CeeDee Lamb over the middle outside of Jarwin. And the Cowboys should be in the red zone quite often. So this is kind of just, he's my guy that I'm kind of planting my flag this year. I've already been doing it as we know. So I've got him at 13. You've got him at 18. Let's cook down the list, man. We got 2 names on this, and we're going to skip. We've got Eric Ebron, newly to the Steelers, and Greg Olsen now with the Seattle Seahawks. So you have both of these guys higher than I do, so I'm going to let you take these last 2 here. Ebron at 17 for you. I've got him at 22. You've got Olsen at 20, and I've got him at 23. But both of us do have him ahead of Will Dissly. So go ahead, Ebron, and then Olsen to follow up, and then we'll skip.
Yeah, I think Ebron's just going to be a tight end hog like we saw 2 years ago, 3 years ago for the Steelers. I think I do need to move him down, though, because he might get 15% market share if he's lucky on this team that I think will pass the ball quite a bit. But I just think that Juju's not really a red zone target as much. He is a little bit, but I don't think Deontay Johnson really is. We didn't see that last year. James Washington is not. So Chase Claypool is really the only competition outside of Juju for Ebron, which that could be competition probably in the back half of the season. But I think Ebron's another fine. If you're going a guy like Doyle, Ebron, Cook, Olsen, like please take a Jarwin, Hawkinson, Fant, because you do have to maneuver it a little bit in terms of like playing matchup and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. He's just kind of a red zone type guy, I think you could say. And then Olsen, I think I'm way too low on him too, but I just can't seem to move him up anymore. He didn't come out of retirement to be a backup to Will Dissly, who gets hurt every year and plays like 3 games max every year. It's like, I think it's just that plain and simple. I think he will have pretty close to 70 targets on this offense. We see them use a tight end quite a bit, and they used Hollister quite a bit, and Hollister's not a tight end. He's a fullback. He's a J-back that had to play there because they didn't have depth there. Now they do with Colby Parkinson they got in the draft. Dissly's probably still going to be hurt, but I think it's going to be Olsen's job, and then maybe they mix in a tight end too with Parkinson, Dissly, Hollister. I don't even know. They have the guy from LSU, the backup tight end, Steven Sullivan. But yeah, I think Olsen's a perfect late round guy too, because if you give him 7 targets, 6 targets a game, like we've seen in the past, he's very efficient with those touches, even at an old age. I think he's definitely a good late round guy too.
Got it. Love it, man. Right on. A couple later names, too, that we have here in our top 24 to not forget about when you're drafting. Again, this is a redraft. The dynasty is a whole nother conversation. In redraft, though, Ian Thomas, Irv Smith, Chris Herndon. Let's not forget the hype train that was Chris Herndon last year, still around. Gerald Everett coming back last year. He was Higbee before Higbee, and now maybe we'll be splitting both those guys. And also, my man, Dallas Goedert. Don't forget about him. If you draft Ertz, reach for Goddard. You got to have that handcuff at tight end, in my opinion. All right, man, let's do as we always do, and we'll get out of here. Let's go 1 through 12 on your rankings. I'll do the same, and then we'll do 13 through 24, and we'll get out of here. 1 through 12, Lucas's initial tight end rankings for PPR redraft. Go.
Yep, Kelsey, Kittle, Ertz, Andrews, Hayden Hurst, Darren Waller, Evan Ingram, Mike Gesicki, Tyler Higbee, Hunter Henry, TJ Hawkinson, and Jack Doyle.
Love it. My 12 are the same top four: Kelsey, Kittle, Ertz, Andrews. I've got Ingram, Waller, Henry, Higbee, Jonnu Smith, Hurst at 10, Gronk at 11, Fant at 12. Give me 13 through 24.
Austin Hooper, Jonnu Smith, Dallas Goedert, Noah Fant, Eric Ebron, Blake Jarwin, Jared Cook, Greg Olson, Gronk, Ian Thomas, Gerald Everett, Kyle Rudolph.
My 13 through 24, I'm going to go with Jarwin at the top, Gesicki, who we talked about a lot yesterday as well, Doyle, Cook, who we didn't talk about at all, but I just think Emmanuel Sanders coming in there is going to disrupt things. Alvin Kamara coming back for sure as well. Hooper, Goddard, Hawkinson, Thomas, Irv Smith. We both have the Vikings there in the bottom 24 there with them running the two tight end sets. Ebron at 22, Olsen 23, Chris Herndon sneaks in at number 24 for me. Lucas, we got about 2 more minutes, man. Please give us a 30-second version of what to expect come July 6th with our draft guide dropping soon.
Yep, the draft guide, July 6th. Like Sky said, we'll update it. Obviously, we'll be adding stuff post-July 6th. That's where you will, if you buy the in-season package, get access to everything in-season as well. It's just the tckpod.com website. Sorry for the free people. We are making it behind a paywall. We find that works the best for us. Yep, July 6th, lots of stuff. I've been dropping tidbits as to different things here and there, as well as our rankings, write-ups for each team, sleepers, busts, all that stuff, why you should not draft Gronk, and that's about it.
Right on, man. Right on. Stoked. I'm stoked to get this draft guide going, man. You and I have been working a lot. So thank you to everybody reaching out. Obviously, TCK Pod is coming up as well, the Listener League, and we will drop information as we can there as well. Make sure to please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Leave a comment here on our rankings. Let us know how you feel about those. Also, please leave a rate and review on podcasts wherever you're listening. We much appreciate those rates and reviews. They help boost our algorithm to get the message out to the people. Follow us on Instagram at fantasyfootball_TCK pod, on Twitter at TCK_pod. Join our Facebook group, the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast page. And, of course, please drop us a DM anywhere you'd like to get individual information, individual questions. Keeper questions are coming up, dynasty drafts, draft order, draft strategy, all these type of things. Feel free to drop in, and however it pertains, Lucas and I will get back to you in a timely manner. We so much appreciate you. This has been another episode of the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast. Tomorrow we jump into a tight end premium mock draft. We both draft a team, so we're not doing one this week. We're doing 2 teams. Find out what both of our strategies were tomorrow with our tight end premium mock draft. So Lucas Kaser, I'm Sky Guasco, and we are out of here.